Hey guys, Political Junkie 2414 here, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be updating or releasing my updated prediction for the 2024 House elections, which are about 9 months out, or 9 months, Jesus, about a year, a little under 1 year away. I'm recording this on December 28th, 2023. Hope you all had a happy holiday. I wish all of you who celebrate a Merry Christmas, and I wish you all a Happy New Year as we go into 2024. So, we're going to be talking today about the House elections, and I'm going to be going over each competitive district. I won't be spending as much time talking about each of them as I would with, if I was making a Senate prediction, because of course, these districts, there's so many of them. I mean, you can see here I have 98 districts that are not labeled as safe. Those are the ones that we will be covering today. Some of them I will probably spend more time on than others because not all battlegrounds are created equal. But right now, let's just, before we start anything, let's go over, where we are, I think, nationally, and what my, kind of give everyone a bit of a refresher and kind of share my opinions on how things stand nationally. So, in 2022, of course, the Republicans won back the House majority after overperforming in 2020, and ended up picking up seats, which was the first time they'd gained House seats in a presidential election year since, like, I think 2004. But in 2022, they were expected to win the House by a lot, and they ultimately only picked up about 9 seats. Democrats were really able to flip a couple of seats and really benefited, I think, and most people would agree with me on this, not only from redistricting not being as nearly or as nearly as much of a detriment as some Democrats thought it would be, but also because of the GOP's lack of strong candidates. Now, Republicans were able to win mostly by racking up wins in New York and California, and also winning a couple of new seats here and there, swing districts like New Jersey's 7th, Iowa's 3rd, and Oregon's 5th, all of which were not great for Democrats, but Democrats were also able to win in, Republican-held seats in New Mexico, Michigan, Ohio, North Carolina, Washington's 3rd. Um, and so overall, it was a pretty balanced election, but Republicans won the popular vote by 3 points, which is quite a bit of a swing from 2020, where it was basically the inverse. And as you can see here, Democrats won 222 seats in 2020. Republicans won the exact same amount. But Republicans in recent weeks, and just since my last House prediction in August, have really this Congress, the 118th Congress, which started this January, has proven to be extremely dysfunctional just from an objective standpoint. The number of bills passed, I think, on record for the 118th Congress is the lowest it's been in. I think that there was this, a lot of reporting has been done on this, but the 118th Congress, only 27 bills have been passed, which is lower than any Congress that was marked on this chart, I think that Axios made, which dates back to all congressional sessions from 1989 to now. And of course, more bills are likely to be passed in the new year. The Congress is only halfway over, and usually more bills are passed towards the end, but Republicans are dealing with a government shutdown, and Kevin McCarthy was ousted as Speaker in October, and Republicans spent 3 weeks trying to find his replacement, which was, after having to hold 15 rounds of voting in January, which is already not a great look for Republicans, trying to prove themselves competent. They had to go through three Speaker nominees, Steve Scalise, Jim Jordan, and Tom Emmer, two of which never even made it to the floor because they didn't want to um, show the public how incompetent this House is. They didn't want to send the message to the public that the Republicans weren't able to, elect a speaker because they figured it would be bad PR, which they're absolutely right. And so on the fourth time was the charm. They got Mike Johnson, who is a pretty junior member of the House, honestly, for the speakership. He's only been in Congress for like 7 years. This is his fourth term. But he was pretty non-controversial at the time. But he's going to be facing a lot of challenges with a government shutdown. The House had to pass two continuing resolutions. There are two government funding deadlines coming up in January. So Republicans are in a bad position nationally, I would say. But again, it's going to be a competitive race. Joe Biden, I think, isn't going to do amazing at the top of the ticket. If you've seen my most recent prediction between him and Donald Trump, I still think Biden is the favorite, despite his low approval ratings, just because of um, the electoral results from 2022 and just all of the social issues and Trump's own weaknesses as a candidate. I do think that Biden is still favored despite his severe unpopularity. And if you look at the generic ballot for 2024, this was something we looked at last year for the Democrats and Republicans in the 2022 midterms. Democrats are currently leading by a margin of 0.5%, which would be automatically a bluer environment. And when you saw how narrow the House GOP majority's margin is, this is going to be, it's not a stretch to say at all the Democrats are favored to win back the House. Now, I'm not trying to give away my prediction, but I guess we'll get into it now that I have kind of set the stage. So we're going to close out all these other tabs and we're going to start filling out these battleground districts. So in Alabama, this is another factor in Democrats' increased chances of taking over the House is the fact that there is mid-decade redistricting happening in many states, some of which benefits Republicans, like in North Carolina, which we'll talk about soon. But in Alabama, the Supreme Court ordered that the state's congressional map was unconstitutional it because they thought or they deduced that the the map violated that there needed to be a second majority black district, and so that makes the congressional delegation in Alabama, it goes from 6 Republicans to 1 Democrat to 5 Republicans and 2 Democrats. And so that drove out the Alabama's Barry Moore, the incumbent in Alabama's second district. I think this district, it doesn't say here, but I do believe that this is like a Biden plus 12 seat. I know there's been a lot of concern about Democrats not being able to turn out minority voters in 2024, but then again, they didn't do too well in 2022, and it is a presidential election year, and I think Democrats, you know, are very much favored to win this that redrawn second congressional district in Alabama. So in Alaska, we have Mary Peltola. She is one of 5 House Democrats in a district that Trump won in 2020, but she has proven herself to be a very formidable candidate. I don't think that she's unbeatable for the GOP, but she's certainly in a pretty good position, I would say, for re-election. She was able to beat Sarah Palin, who again was not the greatest candidate, but did help John McCain win Alaska by a very large margin in 2008, and there's proof to back that up because in 2008, before McCain picked Palin as his running mate, I think he was actually polls showed him, and I know polls aren't everything, but they did show some concerning signs for McCain in Alaska. It showed Obama keeping it like a pretty close race, and then once Palin was picked, the state moved back into the safe Republican column. Peltola has, proven herself to be a pretty formidable candidate. She's won 2 elections before. I don't think Palin's going to be the candidate this time. I heard the lieutenant governor of Alaska's running. I think I also heard a rumor that Kelly Shibaka, who's she was the Republican who ran against Lisa Murkowski for Senate last year. I've heard she might jump into the race. I haven't been following this race very closely, but I'm pretty comfortable saying Alaska is going to stay with Mary Peltola. It could be likely, but since Trump's on the ballot and it's a presidential election year, I'd like to keep it in lean D. I think Peltola wins by 4 to 5 points, does a lot better than Joe Biden. So then we go on to Arizona. We have a couple competitive seats here. Eli Crane's seat. This could be a little bit closer than expected. He beat Tom O'Halloran here in 2022, but that was because O'Halloran was drawn into this Trump plus 8 seat. Crane has been one of he's gotten a lot of blowback from the GOP over his. He was one of the few, or the 8 Republicans who voted to oust McCarthy, and one of the few that was reluctant to vote for him in January. on all 15 ballots. He's been what I think a lot of people would call an obstructionist. I do think I heard Democrats have recruited the president of the Navajo Nation. I think his name is Jonathan Nez to run. So I think he can keep this race interesting. Obviously, I'm very skeptical that he could win it. Um, Not the most interesting seat in Arizona by a long shot, but I don't think it's safe like most people are saying. We keep it around the same margin that Crane won by last time. So then we have two competitive seats here, David Schweikert and Juan Ciscomani. Both of them are narrow Biden seats. Schweikert's is a little bit more suburban though. It's I think it includes in the suburbs or includes suburbs of Phoenix and I think it's got some parts of Mesa and Scottsdale. I'm not an expert on Arizona geography, but includes a lot of the more suburban areas in the state outside of Phoenix. And it's been left trending. Democrats didn't spend a lot of money here. I had it as lean R in 2022, but Schweikert only won by like 0.9%, and this is a pretty left trending seat. I could see him winning. I think a lot of people put him as dead on arrival. I think I had this as lean D in my last prediction. I'm going to move it down to tilt D just because there's a lot of division in the Democratic primary. And Schweikert's not the worst incumbent, but I think this is the year he goes down. In the 6th district, though, this one's a little bit redder. I think this one's a little bit less suburban. It includes more of Tucson, and Juan Ciscomani was able to win. Again, this was another seat where Democrats had a retiring incumbent and didn't really spend a lot of money trying to defend it. And yet, Kirsten Engel, Ciscomani's Democratic opponent, who's running again, came within 2 points of beating him. I think she comes pretty close, but Ciscomani, I think Mark Kelly won the seat in the Senate race by like 10 points, and Ciscomani was able to overperform by a lot. So I think, um, you know, obviously I don't think there'll be as much of a delta between Biden and Trump in this district in Ciscomani's race, but I do think that he will be able to hold on. So yeah, that's Arizona. We'll split those two districts. Arkansas, nothing to say there. California, we've got a lot here, so I'm going to try to go through this fast. The ninth, Josh Harder. He won by a good bit in 2022. I've seen a lot of people putting his district as safe, which I could see. He's usually an overperformer, and I think California was just a bit. It had a really red electorate last year, so I think that's kind of the that was kind of his issue last year. But I mean, I have no doubt in my mind that he will win. The 26th and 21st, I think, were likely, but Hispanic turnout in the Central Valley especially was bad, which we'll talk about with these two seats, the 13th and the 22nd, which I think really inhibited Democrats here. I mean, Jim Costa only won by like 8 in this Biden plus 20 seats, so I think he'll win by like 15. The third district, it's left trending. Kevin Kiley is a decent incumbent. It's like a Trump plus 2 seat, so if Biden does a little bit better in California in this area, if he does better with Hispanic turnout, I could see it narrowing up. But Kylie, I think, um, realistically, I'm not super sold on Democrats flipping his seat, but it will be competitive, that is for sure. Then we go to the Central Valley. We have two Republican incumbents in Biden seats here. John Duarte in the 13th district and David Valadao in the 22nd district. Both of these seats, I would say, were extra red because Republicans had a decent performance at the top of the ticket in California with the governor's election, which, again, I know governor races are not always, there's more ticket splitting with governor's races and federal races, but last year, and this is true for New York as well, Republicans really benefited from decent performances at the top of the ticket with their Republican gubernatorial nominees. And also, Hispanic turnout in these seats was historically low. These swing districts did not cast a lot of votes. So John Duarte is a decent incumbent. I mean, he's a freshman representative. He doesn't have as much, experience, but he's in a Biden plus 11 seat. And I mean, he really, really lucked out. If Hispanic turnout just gets a little bit higher in 2024, he's in trouble. And Adam Gray, his opponent, is running again. Democrats look pretty likely to flip back the seat. Of course, there's always a chance Duarte wins because I mean he won before. He can do it again, and it's a competitive district. But I'm Pretty confident Gray wins here by like 2 or 3 points. I think he'll be the nominee, although I do think there's another Democrat running. So this is a close race, but again, pretty confident Democrats win it back just because they really don't need to improve by that much, and Republicans really benefited from low Hispanic turnout, which really propelled them over the finish line. In the 22nd, I think you can make more of an argument for Valadeo holding on, but right now I'm gonna bet against him because similar to the 13th, he had a decent opponent, Rudy Salas, and while he has overperformed Republican presidential candidates in the past, if you look at the delta between him and the gubernatorial candidate, I think Valadeo actually underperformed Brian Dahl, who was the candidate against Newsom in the governor's race, in terms of how much he won his district by. This is a Biden plus 13 seat. I think Dahl won this seat by like 5. Valadeo only won by 3. And, juxtapose that to um, Valdez's old district, which wasn't too different from this. It was a little bit redder, but I think Trump lost it by 11 points in 2020, and Valadeo won by like point 0.9 or something crazy narrow like that. And so Salas did very well with independents in the district. I think Valadeo really benefited from low Hispanic turnout, and the turnout in this district, it was just awful for Democrats and just much lower in general. I think it was one of the least like um one of the worst seats for turnout in the country. So I do think that in a presidential election year, it's not going to take much for Democrats to boost their numbers. And Rudy Salas is running again. He's a decent candidate. He's a state senator who's overperformed in this region before. So I think Valadeo will go down this time. Of course, there's always a chance he holds on, but his performance last year was not super impressive. So then we're going to go, actually, not quite. We're going to go to Mike Garcia's district, which is Biden plus 13. Um, and he's a pretty good incumbent. He won by 6 points last time. He actually overperformed the Republican gubernatorial and Senate candidates by quite a bit. I think the governor candidate did win his district, but it was like by 2. His district's basically the same as Valadeo's, but Garcia has blah. He's ran against the same Democratic candidate, Christy Smith, um, who is notoriously proven herself to be a terrible candidate, or has really proven herself to be an awful candidate. She's lost 3 elections in a row. He's got a stronger opponent this time. I think it's like some wealthy businessman. I think his name is George Whitesides. I think Dems, I wouldn't call them favorites here by any means right now, but um, they do have a decent chance in a presidential election year. Garcia's become a little bit more moderate since he was first elected. But you know, if this district's pretty left trending, it's gonna get bluer. Most likely, it's pretty suburban. This is outside the LA. This is part of the. It's a suburban seat outside of LA, and it's probably going to be trending towards Biden just based on its recent shifts to the left from 2020 to 2024. So I think Garcia has a real chance of losing, but right now I'm just going to stick with him because he's the incumbent. All right, then we're going to go the 40th, Young Kim. This is a right trending seat. She's one of the 18 Biden Republicans, just like a couple of these other California GOP reps. But she's very popular in this district. It's not only right trending, but they just love Young Kim. She has a more moderate tone. Um, and she's won by a massive margins before. She won by 14 points last year. She won a Biden seat in 2020. Like in the old map. I don't mean I mean she won a Biden district twice, essentially, but this time it's redder, and I think that she wins by a little bit less this time because the environment in California is going to be more democratic because it's a presidential election year. I think she wins by like 10 or 11, but still, Democrats, I don't think are going to be heavily contesting her seat. Then the 45th, Michelle Steele. She's also in a right trending seat. That's Biden. It's a Biden seat, but she's not as good of an incumbent. She had a pretty bad opponent last time. I think she's running against a state senator this time, Democrat. I think that you could make an argument for this race becoming a toss-up, but right now I'm going to keep it in the lean R column. Although I could see her losing if things get really bad for the Republicans in California if Trump really brings them down. The 41st, this is a seat where I've previously had Democrats winning. It's a narrow Trump seat. Ken Calvert has historically overperformed GOP presidential candidates in his old seat under the 2010 after the 2010 census. He overperformed Trump in 2020 in his 2020 election. I think Trump won his seat by 7. Calvert won by 14. Um, but in Calvert's most recent election against Will Rollins, the Democrat who's running again this year, he only won by 5 points, and it's only a Trump plus one seat. So right now, I'm going to stick with him. I think it's I'm a little cautious as to say it moves that far to the left when I have some of these other seats like the 27th and the 45th staying with the GOP. Um, but I seriously think Calvert, this will be his closest election yet, and he's in trouble if it's in 2026 if it's a Trump midterm. I think that he would lose in that scenario. But right now, very close race. I'm going to give Calvert the benefit of the doubt, though. Katie Porter is retiring to run for Senate. So she's leaving the 47th district open. This has been a redder seat down ballot. Most of SoCal has most of these are Biden seats, but they are more open to voting for House Republicans. Um, Porter, while she's a strong candidate, did face a pretty challenging race last year. I've seen a lot of people put this as a toss-up. I think Sabato's crystal ball has it as a toss-up. I think Democrats are well positioned to win this seat. Dave Min, I think, is who's going to be the Democratic candidate. It looks pretty he has Porter's endorsement, and the former congressman running for the seat dropped out. So yeah, and Republicans are running Scott Baugh, I think, is the candidate, and he lost to Porter last year. I think that this seat, pretty similar margin to last year. I don't think it's a pickup opportunity for Republicans for sure, but um, I don't think it's the most likely. And then the 49th, this seat is Mike Levin's seat. It's Biden plus 12, I think, 11. He won by 5 points last year. He actually did better than Porter, which was surprising to a lot of people, including myself. So I think, and this year it seems like the Republicans really aren't contesting him. So I think he could win by actually a good bit more than he did last year. So that's California. Then we go to Colorado. We have the third district and the eighth district. Both of these are competitive seats. We're gonna go to the third first. Originally, with Lauren Boebert running for re-election last year, I did previously have her district as Tilt R. I was gonna keep it or I was gonna switch it to Tilt D just because of all the madness and just the fundraising debacle that has emerged with her campaign. Adam Frisch, the former Democrat, in this seat, who ran for this seat in 2022 and nearly beat her, has been out fundraising her. But yesterday, she announced that she was not going to run in this district and run in Ken Buck's district, this fourth district. And Ken Buck, of course, a Freedom Caucus Republican, who's kind of known as being a bit of a wild card in the House GOP conference, is not running for another term. So she's going to run in that district, which is like Trump plus 20. This is Trump plus 8, and that gives Republicans a better shot here. I think Frisch is already, a pretty good candidate. He has a lot of enthusiasm from last year, but with Boebert not running and her controversial style, I mean, I think she could have won anyway, just based on the fact that it would be a presidential election year, and I don't think Trump would have lost this seat. But I think Colorado being so left trending, he would have probably won it by like 4, and Boebert definitely could have lost to Frisch, and it looked like she was going to lose. And I think the fact that she moved out of this district shows how scared she was because she felt that the fourth actually could be likely, just based on how unpopular Boebert is. But again, redder, could be a reduced margin. But yeah, the third right now I'm going to keep as Tilt R with Boebert not running. The eighth, this is a little bit better for Democrats. Yadira Caraveo won by a pretty narrow margin in 2022 against a pretty decent Republican candidate. This is it voted basically just like the nation in 2020. Biden won it by 4.5. I think Caraveo, now being the incumbent, she's pretty bipartisan in the House from what I've seen, one of the more bipartisan Democrats, which makes sense. She's in a swing district, so she has reason to do that. So I think that right now, with no clear Republican candidate, or with Colorado being so left trending and her previous opponent not running again, I think her name was Barbara Kirkmeyer. Um, I think that Caraveo wins by like two or three. I think she's in pretty decent spot right now for reelection. Connecticut's fifth. This was a close one last year. This was actually a seat where I was spot on, and I had it as Tilt D. Put it as this was a sleeper race. I had it as Tilt D, and it was Tilt D for Johanna Hayes. I could put this as likely. I've seen a lot of people doing that just because it's a Biden plus 11 seat, and but this seat's kind of wonky. I'll admit, kind of has a bit of a tendency to just kind of vote randomly or like vote or vote for Democrats very narrowly and then vote for them by massive margins. It's kind of it's volatile. So I think Hayes not being the best incumbent and with her opponent from last year, who I think his name's George Logan, he's running again. Um, I think this district could be still close, but if Republicans couldn't beat her in 2022, I doubt how they get it done in a presidential election year. So could make a case for likely right now. I'm just going to be safe, put it as lean red. And we are already like 25 minutes into this video, so we need to speed this up. Florida, we're going to speed run for this. The 5th district, John Rutherford. I think there was a court or a federal judge in Florida who struck down Florida's congressional map because black voters in Tallahassee were like denied, um, or maybe it was in Jacksonville, but in northern Florida, black voters were denied under the new map an ability to elect a representative, which likely would be a Democrat. So there's a chance that the seat gets redrawn. I think overall Florida was pretty, I mean, it was very good for Republicans last year. Um, I do think that the margins will slightly reduce in some of these safe districts, or districts that were safe for Republicans last year, like the 7th, the 15th, and the 27th. These were all safe for the GOP last year. The Republican candidates overperformed by quite a bit, like 14 points in the 15th, 12 in the 7th. Maria Salazar won by almost 15 points in like this very narrow Trump seat. Um, I do think Florida is still going to be pretty red in 2024. The Senate race is going to the Republicans. I'm pretty confident in saying that, but I do think the House elections and overall, just the fact that Florida was so bad for Democrats in terms of turnout last year, I think it'll. I don't see how it could get worse for them, at least not this year in a presidential year. The 9th and the 13th or 23rd, I think. Yeah, these are two districts that were a little bit closer than expected last year. Darren Soto won by a decent margin. He's always been kind of an overperformer. I think you can make a case for safe if Biden does really well in the Orlando area, but I'm going to put him as, you know, likely seat. Jared Moskowitz had a very close race in 2022, but he overperformed, I think, both Val Demings and Charlie Crist in his race. I don't see how he loses re-election. The 13th, though, this one's interesting because Anna Paulina Luna is pretty controversial, and she didn't overperform Trump's margin of victory here like by the same margin as say Corey Mills did. He overperformed by 12 points. Laura Lee overperformed by 14. Maria Salazar overperformed by 14. She only overperformed by 1. And this was a seat the Democrats did not contest. This was Charlie Crist's seat, and he was running for governor, and of course got his ass handed to him. Excuse me, I'm feeling a little sick today. Oh, that was nasty. But yeah, I think that this seat, Paulina Luna, in the Tampa area is a little bit like more friendly to Democrats than other areas in Florida, especially like Miami, which is very, very right trending. So I think um, this is a seat that could be a little bit closer than expected. And it's somewhat suburban, so I think Democrats could make this race a little bit closer than expected. I think Paulina Luna wins by a little bit less than 5 as of right now. In Georgia, the 2nd district, this is a majority black seat. Sanford Bishop has proven time and time again that he is able to win. If black turnout does I know there's a lot of concern about black turnout for Biden in Georgia, which I think is valid. But again, it would take a lot for Sanford Bishop to lose, and he's usually, you know, I think he'll outrun Biden in this seat. The 6th, this is a safe red seat, but there is contention about another majority black seat in Georgia. The state legislature, I think, redrew the map, but they redrew another majority black district in for Lucy McBath, which cut out Lucy McBath's seat, which is not majority black, but it is majority minority. So overall, Republicans were able to hold on to nine or to their 9-5 House seat majority in the congressional map or congressional delegation. So we'll see if this map changes. I'll just keep it as likely right now. So yeah, Hawaii, nothing there. Idaho, nothing there. Illinois, the 14th and 6th are likely. Not a lot to talk about here. They're two, pretty solid Biden seats. Not quite safe, but not likely or not not super competitive. The 17th, though, this is a right trending seat. Voted narrowly for Eric Sorensen last year against a pretty bad GOP candidate, but it's Biden plus 8. I don't think his Esther Joy King, who's the Republican who ran against him last year, and also ran against Sherry Bustos, the former Democratic incumbent in this seat in 2020. She ain't running again. I think that this seat's a little bit closer with Trump on the ballot to kind of. This is a more white working class seat, so I don't think that Sorensen's guaranteed to win this by any means. I think he wins it by maybe 3 instead of 4. Um, I don't think it's super guaranteed, but yeah, I think he right now is a favorite. But one the Democrats should definitely pay attention to. It was very contested last year. Indiana, Frank Mervyn did not run a good campaign last year. I had him losing, which honestly might not have been the best opinion, but he ran a really bad campaign. Really, there was, I think, a reason to believe that he could lose. And he underperformed. He did a lot worse than he did under the old maps in 2020. He overperformed Biden in like the district. I don't think changed that much from redistricting, and he won by like 16 in 2020. He only won by 6 last year. He had a good GOP opponent, but he really, I think, hampered himself too with trying to get dirt on her and kind of in the process making himself look bad. I won't get into the details. Mervyn, I think, is eventually set to lose. I think this is a seat that Republicans will eventually pick off. Like probably 2026 if it's a Biden midterm and Republicans do well in the House elections. But right now, I'd say Mervyn wins by pretty similar amount, a little bit less maybe. Iowa, the second and first, pretty decent Trump seats. Both Marionette Miller Meeks and Ashley Hinson, I think, aren't in too much trouble. Zach Nunn, swing district Republican, won against Cindy Axne last year. I think he wins again. I don't think Axne has announced whether or not she's running again. But this is a narrow Trump seat. Iowa's right trending, and it's kind of suburban. Nunn's a pretty decent incumbent. I was gonna move it down to tilt R, but right now I think I'm gonna keep it in the lean R column. Kansas. This is another suburban left trending seat. Has a lot of the Kansas City suburbs in it. Sharice Davids did a lot better than expected last year. I had her winning by like a lean margin, which is basically what Biden won this seat by. And I think you can make an argument for it being safe. Kansas, of course, was very. I think abortion was really a driving factor in just basically a lot of the elections and election victories for Democrats last year. But with the abortion referendum in particular, I think Davids had a really strong performance. And yeah, I could see this being safe, but I don't know. I think that might be a bit much. I think Biden will do better here compared to 2020, or to his performance in 2020, and I think Davids wins by a similar amount. So yeah, that's where we stand. Kentucky, there was potential for Andy Barr's seat to kind of get redrawn. There was like some redistricting drama here, but I think that that's all settled, and the courts in Kentucky have decided it is not a gerrymandered map, so Democrats are stuck with just one seat in the Louisville area. Louisiana, though, there is going to be redistricting, most likely. The Supreme Court declined to weigh in on the state's, challenge or the state's congressional maps, which many people have argued aren't fair for black voters because they only get one majority black seat. Originally, I thought Julia Letlow's seat was going to get drawn in kind of these black majority black areas across on the Mississippi border would become their own district, but I think it makes more sense for lawmakers to draw like a majority black seat around here in on the outskirts of New Orleans and Baton Rouge. So I do think I think the courts have given the Louisiana legislature like a deadline in mid-January, to draw new congressional maps, and after the antics we saw in Alabama, I do think that eventually we will end up with a second majority black seat in Louisiana, which would give Democrats another gain in the redistricting process. Maine, Jared Golden, I had losing last time. He's in a Trump seat. He's really proven himself, though, to be resilient. I could see this being likely, and it probably will be likely, honestly. But I'm just going to put it as lean D just to be careful because the seat is right trending, pretty pro Trump, and in a presidential election year, excuse me, in a presidential election year with polarization kicking in, I think it only makes sense to be a little bit more cautious here and put it as lean D. But I'm very confident in Golden winning again. Republicans don't have a strong candidate to put up against him next time. They at least had the former congressman and Bruce Poliquin last year, but I don't think he's running again. So Golden, the only, concern I think for Democrats here was if Angus King retired and Golden gave up the seat to run for Senate, then I think it would be a flip. But that's not happening. So Democrats hold on to their Trump seat in Maine. And then in Maryland, Andy Harris's seat, this is pretty close to a safe district in terms of 2020 presidential margin, but Andy Harris is an underperformer, and I don't think he's going to do much better next year. I think he could do a little bit worse, but um, he's unpopular, and Maryland overall is pretty left trending. The sixth district, David Trone's retiring to run for Senate. This is a Biden almost double digit seat. This was competitive last year, but I was pretty confident in Trone winning, and he won by pretty decent amount. I wasn't too off in this seat. Dan Cox, I think, is going to be the GOP candidate for this seat. He was the governor. He was the gubernatorial nominee for Republicans in the Maryland governor's race, and I think he definitely basically brought their chances to zero, or brought their chances of holding on to that governorship last year down to zero. I think that the Democrats have a lot of candidates running here, but overall, I think they win this seat pretty comfortably. A little bit less than last year, but still pretty solid victory. Massachusetts, nothing there. Michigan, Bill Huizenga's seat. This is a narrow Trump seat, but Huizenga seems to do pretty well here. If he runs for Senate, which I think looks pretty unlikely at this point just because he hasn't announced and that field has already taken shape, the GOP primary field for the Senate seat. Um, maybe the seat becomes lean if he decides to jump in at the last minute. The primary's not till August, so he's got time. But um, he's been rumored since Debbie Stabenow announced last year that she wasn't going to run. So not super confident in him giving up this seat, but he's you know, gonna win by maybe, a similar margin to last time. He's usually an overperformer. The third district, this is a Biden plus, what was it, 8 seat. Hillary Scholten's a very strong candidate, or, I mean, she's pretty good. This is a very left-turning seat in Grand Rapids, and Republicans primaried out Peter Meyer, who was the pro-Trump, or Trump impeachment or pro impeachment Republican in the House, and they put up John Gibbs last year, who was very right wing. Another display of Democrats really taking advantage of Republicans' awful list of candidates. And so I think Scholten this year, I had it as safe. It could be safe just because it's so left trending, but I'm going to keep it as likely. And then we have these free seats, which are the most competitive. The eighth, Dan Kildee announced he's not going to run again. That makes this seat lean. I've seen people put it as toss up, and I could very much see that if Democrats don't do well in turning out like black voters in Flint or Saginaw. Really, Flint is the main city in this district. But yeah, this will be a historic election because this will be the first time, like in I don't know, more than almost 50 years that this seat is not represented by a Kildee because Kildee's uncle, I think, Dale Kildee, was also the representative for this seat up until his retirement, and now Kildee's going out. So this is a historic election for Michigan's 8th. I do think Democrats right now are favored to hold it, but it's a narrow Biden seat, and Republicans have a pretty bad candidate in Paul Junge, who lost to Kildee by a lot last year. So I think Democrats are going to ultimately hold on to the seat, but you never know. The 10th, I'm going to give this nearly to John James. He didn't have a great performance last year, but I think also he was dragged down by the super Democratic wave, or the big blue wave that hit Michigan. I think that was part of the reason why his victory against Carl Marlinga was so narrow. But either way, he should have won that race by more. I think he's in a narrow Trump seat that includes the Detroit suburbs, but he's proven himself. I think his vote against Jim Jordan for the speakership, I think that was a very wise decision for him to make. It really differentiated him from. It showed to voters that because he put himself, if he voted for Jordan in the speakership election, he would have put himself in a position to be criticized by Democrats as an extremist, which I mean I guess they'll probably still argue that anyway against him. Um, but still, I think James overall helped himself out with that vote. If he had voted for Jordan on the speakership level, I would be more inclined to put this as a tilt D race. But still, Trump plus one seat. I think Michigan's going to be pretty similar in terms of the presidential and the Senate margin as it was last year. And speaking of the Senate election, Elisa Slotkin is running for Senate. She looks to be the front runner for the Democratic nomination, and I do think she will win the Senate race. But she's leaving behind her old seat, which is very, very narrow. It's a very narrow suburban Biden district. It includes Lansing and its suburbs. She won by 5 points last year, but there's a decent Democratic candidate running there who seems to be the front runner. He's a state senator or state rep, I think, and Republicans are running Tom Barrett, the old GOP nominee who lost to Slotkin last year. So right now, I'm going to give it narrowly to the Democrats to hold, but could flip to the Republicans. The first in Minnesota is likely red. I've seen a lot of people putting it as safe red, but it only voted for Brad Finstad by 11 or 12 points, which is more than it did for Trump in 2020. So I could see it being a little bit yeah, I could see it why people want to keep it as safe. Democrats have no chance of winning it, but it's a little bit bluer down ballot. And then Angie Craig's in a Biden plus seven seat, but she's kind of had trouble recently in her elections because of the Green Party candidates splitting the vote with the Democrats. That's why she had such a close race back in 2020. And but I think she's proven herself to be a pretty strong candidate. And I think she's going to win again by a pretty similar margin, probably 6 points as opposed to five. But either way, pretty solid margin. Mississippi, nothing there. The second, Ann Wagner is in like a Trump plus eight seat, but she usually overperforms. Josh Hawley, I think, will drag down Republicans in this district in his Senate race, especially if that race is likely R, which I'm predicting. Although again, Hawley's very much favored to win that race. I don't see how Dems flip it. But either way, the seat could be like lean R on the Senate level, if that. But Wagner is going to overperform Trump. She's a long time incumbent. This is like her sixth term, so she's going to stick around. I don't see how she loses. Montana Democrats have a decent chance to flip this seat with Ryan Zink as the candidate. I don't know if it's Zink or Zinky. I'm just going to say Zink because Zinky doesn't sound right. It's a Trump plus seven seat, but he won by only 3 points against a Democrat who really didn't get a lot of funding, and there wasn't any statewide election for Democrats to rally behind last year. This year, there will be in 2024. I mean, I know it's 2023, but you get it. John Tester's running for Senate, and while I know in my last prediction I said he would lose, I'm sure he's going to carry this district, and depending on the delta between Tester's margin and Monica Tranel, who's the Democrat running again at this seat, um, we could see the seat be pretty close. I think Zink is a narrow favorite right now. I've gone back and forth in my head whether putting it as lean R or tilt R, but either way, narrow GOP victory. Nebraska, Don Bacon, just like David Valadao, is known for being a Biden Republican who's overperformed Trump in this seat by a lot. In 2020, under a pretty similar seat, he won by like 5 points against a much more progressive candidate for the Democrats. And he, in 2022, when the Republican governor candidate, who I think his name's Jim Pillen, only won this seat by like 1 point, Bacon was only able to beat his Democratic opponent by 3 points. And that guy, Tony Vargas, is running again. I think with Trump likely losing this seat at the top of the ticket by a decent amount, I think Bacon, if he doesn't overperform by that same amount, that 10 points, or by 10 points like he did in 2020, he's going to have some trouble. And I think right now he's a narrow favorite or narrow underdog for reelection. In Nevada, these are all narrow-ish Biden seats. I think the first and fourth are likely D. They're both Biden plus eight. Susie Lee's seat, she's, and I've gone back and forth between it being lean and likely. I'll put it as lean just to be safe. She won by 4 points in 2020, so or 2022, and I think she's a decent incumbent. Republicans don't or have a divided primary in that seat. So yeah, that's where we're gonna put it. New Hampshire, the second district is pretty solid for Ann Custer. She won by 12 points in 2022. New Hampshire was very good for Democrats federally in 2022, and it's probably going to be good for them next year. Chris Pappas was in a very close, or was expected to be in a very close race last year, but he defeated Caroline Leavitt, a Trump-backed candidate, by 8 points. I think he wins maybe by a little bit less this time, depending on who his opponent is, but still he is a lot stronger of a candidate than Democrats, and even I think his own campaign expected to lose that race, but he was able to win it by quite a bit. So New Hampshire has been good for Dems, and I think Pappas is not in too much trouble come 2024. I don't think Republicans are really going to target him the same extent. The fifth, or New Jersey, we have the fifth and third is likely Andy Kim's running for Senate. Um, he's a pretty good overperformer, but for some reason, he kind of didn't overperform last year. I think Republicans just had a good electorate in New Jersey. Josh Gottheimer might retire to run for governor, but again, that's in 2025, so he might just stick in the House until then. Tom Keene's district is the real one to watch here. It's a narrow, like Biden plus three seat. We'll check. Or Biden plus four. He won by 3 points against an unpopular Democratic candidate, and he has a lot of hype behind him. He's a suburban, moderate Republican. His dad was governor of New Jersey. Um, I think right now he's a favorite for re-election, just because Democrats don't have a clear, like a super strong candidate to run against him. But still, I think he is very much um, in a competitive race here. I've seen a lot of people make the argument that you know, the fact that he underperformed in 2022 is a sign that he's not as great of a candidate as expected. But again, you can make that case for a lot of other GOP incumbents. So I think right now, Keene is a narrow favorite. Could see this seat flipping, though. Democrats in New Mexico will hold on to the first. This is basically safe, but it's just kind of a likely seat. The second is the real one to watch here. Gabe Vasquez won against Yvette Herrell last year, who was the former Republican incumbent. Harrell is running again, but it's a Biden plus six seat. I think now that Vasquez is the incumbent, he wins by a little bit more. He wins by maybe 2 points instead of zero point 0.7. Then we go to New York. There's going to be a lot of redistricting here. I'm going to try to speed this along because we're already almost 50 minutes in. I don't think I've ever been this far ahead in a House video, and we're still back in New York, but we made some good progress. Anyways, um, sorry, just grabbing something. There's going to be redistricting here. The state Supreme Court said so, so Democrats are likely going to benefit from this, but we're going to be kind of cautious until we see the final maps. We're going to go to Long Island first. Second district, this will probably be a packed district for Democrats if they choose to gerrymander Long Island. They'll probably make Andrew Garbarino's seat like a safe Republican district, and he already won by a lot in 2022 because of how good Republicans did on Long Island. They could draw out Nick LaLota in this seat, um, but again, the primary I don't think for New York, New York's House elections is until like the summertime, and Democrats do have a special election in George Santos' seat, which we'll talk about in a second. So depending on how they do in that, and how if Tom Suozzi wins that special election, that will probably kind of influence some of their map making here on Long Island. I think LaLota right now I'm going to put as Leanar. It could be Tilt, but it's a narrow Biden seat. He's a pretty decent incumbent. The third district, as I was saying, George Santos, he just got kicked out of Congress, and he was a very bad candidate. I had this race, or I can't remember if I had it as likely to be in my last prediction, but I was going to. I moved it to lean once he was out because I do think Republicans have a pretty decent chance here, without him, or a realistic chance at the very least, because it is still a competitive seat, and Republicans have seen success on Long Island, but I don't know. I think the Santos saga really made Republicans look bad here. And I think they have a decent candidate in the special election. Democrats, though, are running Tom Suozzi, the former congressman. He's known for overperforming here. I think he's gonna win the special election, and I think he'll probably win the general election. The fourth Anthony Desposito, better incumbent than Santos, that's for sure. I think this seat has a Republicans have a better chance here. Right now, although I'm not sure. It's a Biden plus 15 seat, and it, depending on redistricting, it could get redder, it could get bluer, but it's going to be a Biden seat still. I think Desposito's in the blue, he's the House Republican in with whose constituencies voted for Biden by the most out of any Republican. Or this is New York's fourth is like the most is the bluest seat with a Republican incumbent running for re-election in 2024. So yeah, that's the gist of why I think Desposito goes down. I think he's a decent candidate, but again, I think he benefited from Republicans just doing insanely well in New York last year. The Long Island trends, again, I'm not saying that Long Island isn't right trending, guys. I think Biden will win this district by less than he did in 2020, no matter how much redder or bluer it gets in redistricting. But I think Desposito, just he'll overperform Trump, that's for sure. But I'm really, really concerned, or really not confident in his ability to win another term in such a blue seat. Mike Lawler, he's in a bit of a redder seat, but he's in a Westchester seat, and Democrats look likely to kind of draw his seat to be sort of more competitive or to be bluer. They're going to try to because there's a competitive primary going on in the 16th with Jamal Bowman, so depending on redistricting, they could draw some more liberal areas from Bowman's district and push it into Lawler's district. Right now, I'm just going to keep it as Tilt D. Mondaire Jones, the former congressman, is running here. Lawler had a good run in 2022, but he was running against Sean Patrick Maloney, who again was a decent candidate, but he had a lot of baggage. He, switched congressional districts, pushed Jones out to run for a House seat in NYC, and now Jones is back. And Maloney, I think, kind of turned off some minority voters, and I think just the whole red environment in New York was really bad for Maloney last year, even though he was chair of the DCCC. New York's 11th, Nicole Maliotakis is a pretty decent incumbent. It really depends on how Democrats draw this seat. It could really get a lot bluer in redistricting. Right now, I'm going to keep it as Leanar just because we don't know. The eighth, Pat Ryan, pretty decent incumbent. I could see this being likely, but it's just depending on what the decision making is from Democrats in New York. I'm very confident he'll win again. He's going to win by more than he did last time. But I'm not sure if his district, the district in Biden's margin, how it's going to fluctuate. It could get a bit redder, it could get a bit bluer, but overall, I think he's a pretty solid favorite for re-election. The 19th, Mark Molinaro is a decent incumbent, but again, I think a bit of an overrated candidate. He only won by 2 points in 2022. And again, I got his district wrong, but again, I got a lot of districts in New York wrong, and I don't think I'm the only one to say that. And I think Molinaro running against Josh Riley again. Um, he's a moderate. He has kind of paved himself and kind of differentiated himself from the more extreme wing of the GOP, as many of these Biden Republicans have done. But I think right now, um, he is an underdog, especially if he gets screwed over in redistricting. And then the 22nd, Brandon Williams is very likely to get screwed over in redistricting if Democrats draw in some more college towns, like I think Ithaca. I don't know if Ithaca is in this. I don't think it's in his current district, but there's been a lot of talk of drawing that in. Ithaca is a college town up in northern New York or upstate New York, if you want to call it that, and very democratic. And that would really hurt Williams. I could see this being, could see an argument for you putting it as lean D right now. It's a Biden seat, and I think right now Williams is an underdog for this seat. North Carolina, this is a seat. This is one of the few redistricted maps, or one of the few states with redistricting, which is benefiting Republicans. Um, a lot of Democratic seats free are going to flip here for sure. These could, Wiley Nickel, Kathy Manning, and Jeff Jackson all aren't running again because they know that they're going to lose. This could be a safe. These could all be safe red. The 11th, Chuck Edwards. I think this seat's going to stay likely red. It was kind of close last year. Um, the Asheville area in western North Carolina is kind of getting bluer. The real one to watch here, though, is Don Davis's seat. It's gotten better in redistricting. I don't know the exact margin, um, but it's bluer than it was, or it's redder than it was than the old 2022 map, which was like a Biden plus 7 seat. And Davis did better than Sherry Beasley here. Sherry Beasley, I think, only won this seat by like 0.5 or something like that. Davis won it by like 5. I think he's going to have a tough race, but I think as long as black turnout stays like decent for Democrats here in North Carolina, um, I think, and with Davis being an overperformer, as seen by his last election, I think he will narrowly hold on. So I think it still is a narrow Biden seat. North Dakota, nothing there. Ohio, the seventh will be likely, but again, not really one we need to talk about. The first, and also there was redistricting slated for Ohio, but um, there was talk of Republicans gerrymandering the map again, but Democrats do seem to be in a good position. I think Mike DeWine and the state Supreme Court said that the map is going to stay in place. So Landsman won by a good bit last year. He beat a Republican incumbent in this Biden plus 9 seat. And yeah, I think he's pretty set for reelection. The ninth district, this one has a lot of drama going on. Marcy Copter is likely to face off against J.R. Majewski, or is potentially facing off against J.R. Majewski, who was the candidate she beat by double digits in 2022. She's a longtime incumbent, known for overperforming the upper Democratic candidates. And now that she's in a swing district, there was a lot of talk. I had her losing last year, and this was probably my biggest flop, one of my biggest wrong takes in the House elections last year was that she was going to lose to Majewski, even though, because I was just kind of going off of just the vibe from the district and how Trumpy or right trending it was. I mean, it's a narrow Trump seat, but Copter was able to beat Majewski because of how he lied about his military service, and the National Republican House Committee, or whatever it is, Congressional Campaign Committee, kicked him off or wrote him off. And now they're dealing with a divided primary again, where they have two non-Majewski candidates running. One, the original one, Craig Riedel, was said to be their guy, but he made some statements, or he was found to have made some or allegedly made some statements about Donald Trump that would turn off primary voters. So now Republicans have turned to another guy, but Riedel's still staying in the race. So Majewski could very much benefit from a split electorate, just like he did last year in the primary, and get to the general election. And that could, put this race in likely D once again. I don't think Copter would win by 13 like last year, but I do think she'd win by probably like high single digits. With it being a presidential election year and Trump being on the ballot, I think it would be a little bit redder. But again, Tim Ryan only won this seat in a dead heat, and she was able to win by 13. So again, still pretty decent margin. The 13th, this is another narrow Biden seat. I think this was Tim Ryan's old seat, although it was a little bit further out west or out east here in the Youngstown area. But Amelia Sykes is running like a or a free Biden plus free seat. She ran against a bad opponent last time. I could see this being tilt D, honestly, but she's proven herself to be a pretty decent incumbent, and I think she might overperform Biden. I don't know. I'm gonna keep it in tilt D just to be sure. It is a close race, but I do think right now she is a favored to win this seat. It is a white working class seat, but a little bit it's bluer than the ninth. Although again, I think Copter's in a better position just because of her incumbency and the debacle with Republicans there. Oklahoma, nothing there. Oregon, 6th and the 4th are likely, nothing to talk about here. The 5th, though, this is one that I've had a lot of internal debate about. Lori Chavez de Remer is running in a pretty Biden, is in a decently, a seat that voted for Biden by a good amount last year, but I do think, or in 2020, but in the Senate race in 2022, which took place alongside her congressional race, I think Ron Wyden won the congressional seat by a pretty similar margin, and she was still able to beat her progressive Democratic opponent by a good bit. The seat also just is kind of wonky. I think the fact that she was able to win by a decent amount last time kind of shows that she can was able to win despite the headwinds from the Senate race last year is a good is enough for me to put this race as tilt R. Again, she did have the governor's race, which strong performance for the Republicans in the governor's race going um for her. But I think right now Shabazz Demirmer with since she's likely to face off against the same opponent as last time, I'd say she's a narrow favorite for reelection. Pennsylvania, the first district, if Brian Fitzpatrick loses his primary, which is looking unlikely, but if he does, the seat is, I mean, it's like Biden plus 4.5. It would probably go to Lean D just because his primary opponent is a very Trumpy, very unelectable candidate, very reminiscent of the kind of extremist Republican who many of whom cost Republicans a lot of these competitive seats in 2022 last year. The 10th I'm going to put as Lean R. Scott Perry usually overperforms by a good bit, but he's facing a lot of legal drama. And the Harrisburg area is very much trending towards the Democrats. It's a Trump plus 4 seat, but Biden has did very well in Dauphin County compared to Hillary Clinton in 2016 in Cumberland County, which is like a suburb of Harrisburg. I think Perry's not. The Democrats have been trying to knock him off for years. I don't think this year's the time, but I think this will be a little bit closer than last year. The 17th, this seat was pretty decent for Chris Delugio last year. It's a Biden plus 6 seat. I think it's a little bit closer this year because Democrats had such a good environment going for them in Pennsylvania with Doug Mastriano as the governor's candidate and Dr. Oz as the Senate candidate. They do have Bob Casey running again on the Senate race on the Senate ticket, so that's good for Delugio. But I think right now, pretty comfortable on him winning. I just think it'll be a bit closer. The 7th and the 8th, I think, pretty similarly narrow toss-ups, but I think both stay with the Democrats. Cartwright, I think, is in trouble come the next red wave election, whether it be 2026, 2028, or if he loses next year, because he's a pretty decent incumbent. He overperformed a John Fetterman in the Senate race, which is saying something just because of how big of that solid 5 point margin that Fetterman had in the district or had statewide. I think Susan Wild only won by 2, and Fetterman won her seat by 5. So she's not the best incumbent, but she was able to win in a huge upset last year. These are both, the 8th, I think, a little bit more volatile, or volatile, whatever. Same difference. I think the 7th is a little bit more your typical battleground seat. The 8th is also very close, but more Republican leaning. But I think Cartwright and Wild win by similar margins, both very decent incumbents, both have proven to be able to hold on before. So right now, not going to bet against them. Rhode Island, the second district was competitive last year, but Alan Fung was a very decent incumbent or decent Republican candidate. I don't think he's running again. He hasn't said anything, so safe Dem. South Carolina's first, Nancy Mace, has another Republican who voted to oust McCarthy. One of the more shocking, which was a pretty shocking vote considering was not necessarily part of that Freedom Caucus wing of hardliners. But Mace, I think the seat has gotten some. The South Carolina map has been under consideration from the Supreme Court because I think some court in this area found that Republicans had gerrymandered the maps to make it a little bit more favorable towards them. So, because this was a swing district back in 2020, Mace beat the Democratic incumbent Joe Cunningham, but now it's a Trumpless 8 seat or 9 seat. She won by a good bit. So, but I don't think the Supreme Court's likely to strike this map down, like they did with Alabama, or unlike what they did with Alabama. So I think Mace right now, I had it as lean R, I think, on my last prediction, but I don't know. I'm going to keep it as likely R. I don't think Republicans have too much to worry about with that redistricting process. South Dakota, nothing there. Tennessee, I think there was something about redistricting here, but either way, Tennessee's 5th. Andy Ogles, this is, Republicans gerrymandered Nashville, but doesn't look likely to be redrawn. It's a Trump plus 11 seat. Ogles won by 14 points. I think he wins by a pretty similar margin. I don't think it's a safe race, but still pretty decent for the GOP. Texas, 3 competitive seats here. The 28th, Henry Cuellar I did have initially as like a lean. This was a lean race, I think, because there was still consideration for a Democrat to jump into to primary him. Jessica Cisneros was probably the one who came to my mind because she had ran against him for for his primary in 2020 and 2022, and nearly beat him last year. But Democrats have really managed to, keep him from facing a primary challenge last year or this coming year. And with the Texas primary coming up in March, and the filing deadline already passing, and Republicans not really seeming to be playing for his district as much, I think Cuellar's in a pretty good position. Vicente Gonzalez is in a bit of a um, weaker spot, despite his district being bluer. Mayra Flores, the former GOP rep here, is going to run again, but Gonzalez beat her by 9 points last time, which was not great. It was more than I expected. I had it as lean D. Some people thought, I think the consensus was Flores was going to win by the end of it, but it's a Biden plus 16 seat. I think it gets a bit redder in 2020. And also, Texas is another state where like there is some redistricting. Um, Drama, but again, like Texas is such a big state compared to those other to like New York or Alabama or Georgia in terms of just population and thereby congressional seats. I mean, look, there's like 38 here. So I don't think Texas is very likely to have its map redrawn. The 15th, this is a right trending seat. All of these three are in South Texas, the Rio Grande Valley, and Monica De La Cruz. She's a pretty decent incumbent. I think maybe she wins by a little bit less this time, but again, proven, kind of walked a moderate line like many of these other swing district Republicans. And I think with the Rio Grande Valley trending right, all these seats will trend right. But with this being the reddest one, I think it goes red, and Democrats hold on to with their the Democratic incumbents in those other two seats hold on. Utah, there has been some redistricting drama here, but with the fourth district, but I don't really think it's going to change. Vermont, nothing there. Virginia, we have the first district, Rob Whitman. He's like I don't know how blue this seat is. It's Trump plus 6, but he's an overperformer. He's going to win again. We have two retiring Democratic incumbents here in the northern part of the state. Jennifer Wexton, unfortunately, has Parkinson's. Well, it's not even Parkinson's. I think it's a much more severe form of the disease. So she is really struggling and has decided not to run for re-election. Hung Kao, her GOP opponent, is running for Senate, and I've seen some people put this as safety, but I think Republicans, I'll put it as likely to, even though it's like a Biden plus 20 seat. Um, I think the former Speaker of the Virginia House of Delegates, Eileen Fillercorn, is running here. I think she'll be the Democratic nominee, although again, very crowded primary here. And the same for the 7th District, where Abigail Spanberger is retiring to run for governor in 2025. I think, Democrats have a competitive primary here too, but this is a Biden plus 7 seat. Yeah. And Spanberger had a pretty decent performance last year. I think it'll be a bit closer this time. But Dems have been able to have success in Virginia, as shown by last year and this year's election results. And so I think next year, not going to be too problematic for Democrats to hold on to a seat. The second, though, it's a narrow Biden seat in Virginia Beach. But Jen Kiggins kind of has that same swing district moderate type that people like Mike Garcia, Mike Lawler, Anthony Despacito have walked that fine line. I think Kiggins right now, she benefited, I think, from black turnout in rural black areas not coming out as heavily to vote as they probably will in or as they did in 2022. They'll probably be more black turnouts and minority turnout in general is probably going to increase in since we're heading into a presidential election cycle. But I think Kiggins right now narrow favorite for re-election, but if Democrats do very well here, they could absolutely win this seat and flip it back. So now Democrats have already won the House majority, but we have a couple more seats to cover. And hopefully we can do it quickly because this is a really long video. This is the longest House prediction video I think I've ever made. I should not have spent that much time in the beginning talking. Uh, Washington's 8th, Kim Schreier, is going to win again. She's in a pretty it's Biden plus 7. She won by a pretty similar margin. Um, there was some hype about her losing last year. I wasn't on that train. But I did underestimate her. I underestimated most House Democrats, but um, you know, most of the seats I got wrong were seats I thought would go red that went blue. But of course, in New York and California, those were exceptions. So the 8th, I think, is staying blue. The 3rd, a little bit. This is the seat. This was a massive upset for Democrats last year. Jamie Herrera Butler, the former Republican incumbent, who was another pro-impeachment Republican, like Peter Meyer, got primaried. And Joe Kent, the Republican nominee, who was very pro-Trump, lost this Trump plus 4 seat to Marie Gluesenkamp Perez. He's running again. Jerry Herrera Butler, I think, is running for some other statewide office in Washington. So I think Perez right now, if Republicans face or put Kent up against her, is favored. She is one of the most. She's kind of fit that Mary Peltola, Jared Golden moderate type. I think those three are like very good examples of moderate House Democrats, who are all three of which are in Trump seats. And I think Perez right now is a narrow favorite for re-election. I think it could honestly be lean D, but right now I'm just going to be safe because Trump's going to win it and ticket splitting, yada yada yada. But of course, polarization could definitely bring Gluesenkamp Perez into some trouble. But I think right now, with Kent just being such an awful candidate, she's going to win. So West Virginia, nothing there, although Alex Mooney's retiring to run for Senate. Wisconsin, the state Supreme Court said that the legislative maps need to be redrawn. The state legislature maps, to be specific. We're still waiting on Republicans to make a decision, or for the state Supreme Court to make a decision on whether or not the congressional maps need to be redrawn. I'm going to keep these two seats as lean R, both of which voted or are listed here as likely are. Derek Van Orden picked up this seat in 2022, but he underperformed almost everyone's expectations. This was pretty much a guaranteed flip, and he only won by 4 in this white working class seat. And then in Wisconsin's first, Brian Steele won by a little bit less. I think most people had this as safe R, but still, I think both of these seats could be redistricted. Right now, I'm just going to give them to the GOP for the benefit of the doubt. And so after this very long video, my God, we end up with Democrats taking back the House majorities. This is my own prediction again. Not everything I say is fact. I'm sure that this will not be my final prediction. I'm sure some things are going to change between now and then. But right now, I think the Democrats will win back the House majority narrowly, win 221 seats to the Republicans' 214. Overall, very, very close election. I think that the House is better Democrats have better prospects for winning back the House than holding on to the Senate. I think right now, it is likely that we will see both chambers of Congress flip to the other side, which is weird because we're in a divided government. Usually, we haven't seen like a Republican House flip to the Democrats and a Democratic Senate flip to Republicans at the same time. We haven't seen that before. When both chambers of Congress flip, which is what I'm expecting next year, usually they both flip from one side to the other together. They don't flip. It's usually like Republicans hold both houses and then Democrats flip both of them. This is a very unique sort of flip-flop scenario that I'm predicting here, but I think that most people agree with me. This would um, probably be I'm very confident right now that the GOP has really they have not had a good year for public or in terms of PR. I think the Democrats right now are really in a good position. They have proven that through their continued victories in the special elections throughout this year and the governor elections. And I think that, of course, it's going to be a close race. Republicans very much have a chance to hold on to House control and get a trifecta with Trump winning the presidency and then flipping the Senate as well. But right now, I do think the Democrats will win the House majority. And I do think there's a chance that this happens as Trump wins the presidency against Biden, which I do think, I'm not going to write that off. I don't think that's what's going to happen. But if Trump wins the presidency, I wouldn't necessarily think that means that you should count Democrats out for House control. So thank you all so much for watching this hour-long video. I've never made a house prediction video this long. This is like 20 minutes longer than I usually make them. So thank you so much for sticking with me. If you did, I don't blame you if you skipped to the end just to see my full prediction. But thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, turn on notifications so you don't miss another video like this. And yeah, check out my non-political channel, Interactor127, and my comrades channel, GrowlingZeus666. And I'll see you all next time when I talk about all things politics. See ya.